everyone. Welcome back to the Upset Podcast. We're here for another lively discussion. And I'm not here alone. I have the crew here with me. Here they are, my fellow upsetters. How's everyone tonight?
Great,
Good.
great. Good to be with you.
Awesome.
Good.
Ready to talk.
Yep. We're excited. I mean, last week we had a great discussion about executive committee, and we kind of, dropped a few hints that this week we're going to be talking about church governance. And probably against our better judgment, we have no, Callie, who's going to lead us in this particular discussion. So we turn it over to you, Sir Tally.
All right. And in my own gentle and self-effacing style, I'd like to introduce this topic. About 5 decades ago, Herb Bloomer advanced the notion that all entities go through life cycles. Typically, especially with religious groups, they start off as movements. A movement is something where ideas, principles, values, and certain end goals mobilize a group of people, and they come together working toward, in accordance with certain principles. That's a movement. But then a movement realizes that in order for it to be effective, it has to find a greater level of structure, and a movement then moves into an organization. But after a while, the organization realizes that unless it is able to sustain itself and maintain a sense of legacy, that it will lose its direction, and then it becomes an institution. From movement to organization to institution.
Wow.
But what you really want to understand, if you really want to know the values that are driving the institution, you have to ask yourself, how does it govern itself? And today, we want to talk about how we, the Fellowship of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, how do we govern ourselves, going from a movement now to an organization and now to an institution? How do we govern ourselves? Upsetters? What do you say? How does the governance of the Seventh-day Adventist Church work? How many levels, Pat, of institutional structure exist in the Seventh-day Adventist Church? For 10 points.
For 10 points. I'll take.
I would get about 1 point about now. Yeah.
Well, Alex, we're talking about 4. I think we're looking at 4. And I know you're going to correct me somewhere along the line, but I'm looking at conference. Should I go up or should I come down?
Anyway, you
start
want
from the
to
bottom. Start from the bottom where it matters.
No,
All right.
I think you should start at church.
Yeah, local.
Yeah. Right. So now if you say local
Bottom
church,
up.
then I'll say 5. So let's go local church. Then we move to conference. From conference, we move to union. From the union, we go to the division. And then from division to the general conference, GC.
Ding, ding, ding.
All right. Just want to make sure, because I was leaving out the church until you guys looked at me like,
Don't leave out the church.
9 points, Pat, 9 points.
So you're saying that there are 5 families of leadership. I'm trying to figure the last time I heard about 5 families involved in some kind of organization and governance. I think it was in New York, but we won't go there.
Come on, John Gotti, move forward. Go on, John.
So there are 5 levels of leadership. And you can't really have any kind of structure, any kind of entity existing without governance. Are we a democracy in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, or
Have mercy.
what are we? How do we govern ourselves? Are we an oligarchy? Are we a dictatorship? Are we a democracy?
Well, I believe we have a representative model in our church.
Yeah.
So we're a republic, and I left that out just for that. So we're a republic. We govern
But essentially,
ourselves along
we're
representative lines. What's that?
essentially we're a little bit of all of what you mentioned.
So
We
we're like
really
a gumbo.
are.
Okay.
Is that intentionally designed, or is that because of
human
sin?
pathology? Yeah, sin. Let's put it that way. I came up with a clinical term, but it's sin. Let's just bring it down.
Well, I mean, when it comes to forms and structures, a democracy says that every person gets one vote. Is that the Adventist Church?
Well, I guess
Yeah,
it depends
I mean-
on what angle you come from.
Yeah, at certain levels.
In the Adventist
really?
church, you might not. Everyone can't get their way, but everybody can have their say.
Everybody gets
Right.
one vote?
But even when
No,
we
you can have your
appoint
say.
someone,
You can have your opinion. You can raise your voice.
Well, I mean, you can be a voice crying out in the wilderness. If the wilderness ain't listening, it doesn't really matter much. I mean, you know.
But I think like our last show that we were talking about with the executive committee that we were talking about, I think it's the same thing, but it's on a larger scale.
Okay.
Because the Adventist Church is a world church, and because it's a world church, there has to be some type of flow, some type of support system, and that's still to be desired. We know that many people are talking about how finances go up and how information comes back down, etc. But there still should be some type of way, because I know where you're going with this, Tally. Do we
better
really
than I am,
vote?
because I don't know. So please continue.
No, because the truth is that do I, on the church level, get to choose what's going on in the general conference? Go ahead.
I don't want to interrupt you, but I'm just thinking it's more about representation.
Sure.
Right.
At the local level, when you're choosing who's going to represent your church or your area, you have a say in whether or not that person or who you want to recommend. Okay. Once you don't utilize that, you can lose your say. So I think sometimes we want to have a say when it's already too late. If you had chosen someone or selected someone to represent you who you felt held the same beliefs or standard as you, then you're confident that person is going to take your way of thinking to the next level and represent your thoughts there. And then the same thing keeps going. The representation just keeps going up. And if you don't start at the bottom, by the time it gets to the top, your voice is...
It's something different. It's something different. And I think that's parallels with our government for the United States or any modern society, is that you pick a representative and you let that representative know what your concerns are, what are the things that you want to see that representative do for you on the higher level. However, there's a caveat. When that representative goes to Congress or goes to the executive committee or goes to GC or whatever, there are other considerations that representative have to factor in decision making that the person at the pew has no clue about. And so then you rattle the cages of the folk, on the ground level, and they say, wait a minute, I sent you to Washington, or I sent you to the Congress, I sent you to represent this point of view, and you're not doing it.
Right.
So
isn't that same thing happened in Texas with the voting situation that has occurred? So you could kind of look at the same thing. Chuck, I'm with you at that. By the time we play telephone, the game telephone. By the time it gets to where it needs to get to, what kind of information are we getting back? What kind of support are we getting? What kind of benefits are we actually getting back to? But here's where I'd like to switch this back to, because a lot of our listeners, those who are listening right now, I had a church that never went to GC, and it was up the block. Wow. Some people in my church didn't even know where the general conference building was, and it was literally 20 miles away from where it was. Had no clue. So I think what happens is that we need to look at the church first on a global standpoint. Let's just think global, for example, because what's going on here in the Allegheny East Conference is not necessarily what's going on in Africa, or what's going on in India, or what's going on in different places. Let me just give you a great example of what I'm talking about. Many of the ministries that you see at the General Conference, there's an expectation that all of those ministries will trickle down to the conference level. Let's take, for example, not like Paul. Let's look at Paul, for example. Well, when we go to our Paul leader, we want to take a test, or we want to get excused from a test on Sabbath.
Public affairs and religious liberty for those.
I'm sorry, religious liberty. I'm sorry. Say that again, Latasha, because they need
public affairs and religious liberty.
And religious liberty. Anytime we think religious liberty, we're thinking, I don't want to work on Sabbath. Can I get a letter? I don't want to. But remember, on a GC level, think about what's going on in other countries where they are dying for their belief system. You see what I'm saying?
Literally.
Literally dying, by the way. I'm not just saying they're literally dying. So that's what the first thing I want us to be able to look at, instead of even on a voting standpoint, is why the General Conference is there, why the North American division is there, why the union, where people say we don't need a union anymore, etc., why they're there and why the local conferences are there. And I think if our constituency knew about that, then our voting and I think Chuck likes to say this, the way that we are informed, I think that's GP's word. The more we know, then we'll know why certain things reach the top, or
what
why
a
we
great
need
conversation this is about stuff that doesn't really matter a whole lot to people in our pews. And let me see if I can bring it back to.
Go ahead, bring it back.
Fix it.
Bring it back.
Because, well, since we've already decided that there are various levels, and we realize that we are a representative form of governance, we know that the local member doesn't vote for the people who vote for the people who vote for the people in the upper reaches. Let's talk about the ones that we do vote for, the conference leadership. Let's talk about how we govern ourselves conference-wide. How do we select the people who will lead our conference? Now, before we go any further, this is a very critical thing, because our conference is about a $40 million in tithe operation on an annual basis, not to mention the almost $250 million worth of property that we manage and run. And let's not even bring into the consideration the hundreds of souls of individuals that we employ whose lives are affected and their families are affected by the way we run things. I'm imagining with that level of responsibility, both fiduciary and human, that there must be some real careful consideration to how we govern ourselves and how we choose that governance. How do we do it, ladies and gentlemen?
We cast
Carefully.
lots.
You know what?
Carefully?
lots.
Oh, okay. There it is.
Rock, paper,
ladies and gentlemen, the
scissors.
show is over.
There you go.
now.
Rock, paper, scissors.
We do it carefully.
You know, I'm gonna
do we
throw
do
Chuck
it?
in. I'm gonna throw Chuck in this. Chuck is gonna say, somebody said it just now, prayerfully, right? I mean, and really, when you look at it, isn't it really that? Nick, you set us all up, and I think you set the listeners up also to be able to say, wow, there's really a whole lot that's going on. That means
There's
now
a whole
I
lot
have
at
to
stake. I don't know about going on, but at stake. Yes.
Okay,
Right.
got you.
I think we brought it up last week. A lot of times people become interested after something happens and like, how did that happen? How did that person become so and so? And we have to shift from being reactionary to now understanding how, if you wondered how that person got there, now you have to do the research, because listen, guys, since we're talking about Allegheny East, next year is our constituency session.
2022.
Well, isn't this so appropriate then to talk about then how we choose the people who provide the governance for this conference?
So
how does
can I take a
it
stab at it
happen?
before Chuck, you go? I know you're going to say something enlightening. I'm assuming that people
or totally stupid.
Did he say enlightening or lightning? Which one? Did he say lightning or
Hear me
enlightening? Okay.
I'm assuming, as a newbie to this conference, that people politic in secret, and you pray that you have enough, people who are for you when you show up for the constituency session, and then you act surprised and you pray you win. Is that what happens? Because I don't see anybody publicly, campaigning like, hey, I feel led to lead the conference at this time. This is my vision, my goal. And we prayerfully consider the options before us. And then we go to the committee. So it seems like everything's done in secret, and then everyone's surprised and shocked at what happens, when that time comes in 2022.
That couldn't possibly be true for a church where we believe in transparency and openness and honesty. I would imagine that doing something in secret would be totally inimical to all of the purposes and values that lead us to be what we are. So,
Inimical.
In theory.
Charles, would you like to speak now?
Please fix it.
Don't let Charles speak.
Dude.
No, I think for some of our members, and I can go in 4 different directions, but for a lot of our members that are not fully engaged, they feel like, oh, this is just bureaucracy and control. That's all it is. It's bureaucracy and control. I really don't have a voice. Right. Because even if my voice is heard, it's not listened to. And there's a difference. So, I can say, oh, and that's fine. In some people's mind, the deal's already cut, so it doesn't matter. I found something interesting because of the angle that I see a lot of things that we talk about from the media standpoint. I'm able to observe some things that maybe when you're not in the thick of it, you don't see. For instance, the last constituency session we had, when they had open mics, there was a lot of discontent, a lot of confusion, a lot of, I didn't know this was, and who is this person and all. And that's a lot of pent up anger and resentment. And
flow of information.
And I really think we need to address that because when we come to the constituencies, I've been in constituency sessions that started at 8 in the morning and didn't get done till 11 or 12 o'clock that night because of all of these missteps that we're not realizing that are happening behind the scenes for not only membership to understand how their church is governed, but having a voice. And you said, Tally, transparency. That's the real key right there. Transparency, not translucency. There's a difference. Transparent, you can see through. Translucent, you know there's something on the other side, but it's not clear.
But I think we need to address some of the nuts and bolts of this process. Okay, because go ahead, Marlene. You want to say something?
May I share this before you move? Because during the constituency, by the time, every church chooses representatives and you come in the constituency gathering, there's already some decisions that have been made.
Right.
So I think one issue that was very prevalent last time was that they wanted all of the nominees to be before the people. And what had happened, there was actually some type of minimizing of the nominees and maybe just narrowing it down to 2-3 people. Well, there were at least, I think, a couple. And so we all know that there is a committee that is chosen to choose the nominees, right? But I'm with GP. How do they know whom to choose? And so the church is still, even though there's transparency, you don't understand bylaws, you don't understand, so many things that are created to help you make these decisions. And so when you do come, what do you know? You don't even know half the people sometimes. So you just got a little sign in your hand. He's like, I guess that's nice. Unless you are really political in church information, you have no idea, and so though there's some representation from all of the churches there at one time, who chose the nominees that are before me? Who narrowed it down to the 2 people? Where the 6 are out of all of the conferences? Is it just these 2 that could really lead? So I'm with Chuck. I think that we need more information as to how to understand this church organization. Does it need to be changed? Does it, do we need to really vote one by one? What's going to help?
Well, I think that we have delegates that represent areas and groups all the way up to the general conference. We have that delegate process. But I think where we fail sometimes is that we don't train our delegates. Our they get a packet. Here's your packet. You go through it, figure it out, But and let me go back to an experience I had. Elder Alvin Kibble had asked Media Center to come down to Washington, D.C., and he invited as many delegates that were already chosen to go to General Conference to DuPont Park Church. And we were to film the training of the delegates. They went through line by line so they could fully understand before going to the General Conference how the church is structured, how it's governed, and what the process is. And many of those folk that came as official delegates had no clue that it was that robust and that engaged. So I think training and information helps delegates who are responsible for going up the chain and being a part of the governance process.
I wanted to go back to, because Marlena mentioned, being at the session and, people coming to the mic. And by the time you get to the session, there's one person that the nominating committee is presenting. Okay. And you're voting that person up or down. But then working it back, how is the nominating committee formed? There's a organizing committee that that
That's right.
selects the nominating committee, and it,
Mhm.
and that goes back to your church in terms of representation there, and then who keeps being recommended to be part of these committees. So that's the part where education can happen as well, because a lot of times people are like, I don't want to do it. I've heard people say that, I don't want to go to no more meetings.
But
I don't want to, I don't want to represent. But then
oh,
when certain decisions are made, they're very vocal about.
that's nice. I mean, at the risk of being persistent and insistent, I think a greater question is, how do those names come to the nominating committee?
That is
What
very
does the
good.
system allow for? Does the system say, I mean, like GP said, do we go into a room and wait for a moving in the mulberry bushes, and then the committee says, I'm getting a feeling, the James Brown inspirational moment, and then a name comes out of thin air and somebody becomes elected, and they say, I am so shocked. I had no thought of this. I didn't know this would happen. Let me share with you my thoughts now.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's
the question is,
my acceptance speech, right?
first of all, how do we know what we need? How do we know who can fill that need?
Yeah.
And how do those individuals represent themselves?
Yeah.
Suppose I wanted to be president of the conference. Matter of fact, I think I'd
We
like
think you do.
Go for it,
everybody
man.
listening to me right now. I want to be the president of your conference.
There you go.
Can't say it out
How would
loud.
I?
You
How
can't
would?
say it in public.
How
would you
would
make that
I
happen?
then make that known? How does the system allow me
With the
to
Upset
say, I
podcast.
perceive that God
Right.
is calling
It's
me
a
to
great
do this?
platform.
I don't think our
Well,
current system allows for that. I feel like if that's ever vocalized publicly, you already have a target on your back to
Well,
not.
so let me make sure I understand
So,
this.
so
We've
you
got-
you
we got a
rally you're really talking about the popular vote versus the electoral college kind of thing.
Mm.
Well,
we've got a $40 million operation with $250 million in resources, with hundreds of families represented by employees. But the idea as to who the leadership will be is something that just kind of gets conjured out of thin air once every 5 years. Is that what I'm being led to believe?
That's what we do.
Folks?
I'm sure they're thinking that they're led by prayer. I would like to say, that people would go into prayer, but I do have some thought processes, because from what I have seen as being a delegate before, it seems as though the nominating committee only has a very few names, and it appears to be a popular vote. And I do remember that there were times that people sent in resumes to show, hey, I've got some skills with this, I've got some training, and I think that I could be a really good help for that. And it was just really turned down because they felt that they were being led by maybe prayer, that God was leading them in a particular direction. And so this is something we really need to think about, because it can't be just narrowed down to just a couple of people all the time. And then by the time it comes to us, there is just one name. And then it goes back to, well, I've seen this person before, so why not?
Let's put it into perspective. Let's put it into perspective for a second. It's the same thing at church, right? You pick a committee first at church. That committee chooses a nominating committee at church. Right. You sit down with those 14, 15 people at church and decide who's going to be the head elder, who's going to be the head, and not decide. You're going to nominate who's going to be the head deacon, who's going to be this, that, and the other. And it's based on what they think they know or who they think they know. Right. Exactly. You go back. This is the difference. You go back now and you say to them, usually it's the chairperson who calls them and says, hey, you've been nominated to be the Sabbath school superintendent. Is that something you want to do? Yes or no? If not, it comes back. So it's supposed to have the same type of
right. But it's a smaller selection of people. When you're looking at a conference, you're looking at thousands of people that I'm sure some good people are being missed.
I want to make sure that I'm understanding this wise and astute panel, and that is that a $40 million operation
wise and astute
with $250 million in assets, and we are all employees of this operation, and we're saying we don't know how the names come forward to lead and direct and manage this operation. Is that what
Tasha knows. Tasha knows.
It's not that I don't know how
So
the names come
You
forward.
know how the names come forward. Okay,
No,
so now next year there's a constituency meeting. Who are the names coming forward? Seeing that you know.
No,
now it's Tally.
She says she knows how.
because
know
Tally
how
Farrell.
they come forward.
Okay,
They come
tell me
forward
how.
by those on the nominating committee making
Right.
a recommendation.
Yes, we know that.
Now, how they get to the point of making that recommendation,
What?
Now that can be the question.
exactly.
Wait a
Right.
minute.
It gets
Hold
there
the
by
bus.
Nick just saying that he wants to be the president. So
Hold
somebody
the
will be
bus.
sitting there and
Are
somebody
you?
will say,
Are you?
but I
Wait, the
heard Nick.
nominating committee meets what? 2 weeks before? A month before now?
No, maybe a couple of months before, right? Couple
I
of
think it's
months.
only a
yeah.
month before.
1
I
month.
think it's in September.
Uh-huh.
So you're saying
October, yeah.
you're saying that the nominating committee, when they meet, they come up with the name.
That's
Yeah.
the formal process.
Right. Names are
I'm not saying
nominated.
names
Yeah.
haven't been circulating around.
There are no names until the nominating committee comes forward, and then they meet. Is that
I
what she
feel
said,
like
Pat?
In the
Did she say
nominating
that, Pat?
committee, in theory, is supposed to
heard that.
represent,
I'm just asking Latasha to take me out
the
this
lower
school.
levels of the church governance. But a greater question I have is, whatever name comes, what is the vetting process?
Thank you, Charles.
Yeah,
Thank you, Charles.
I feel like we probably take, certain positions like the VP or the ministerial and a few wild cards, and we put them all in on a list, and then the committee looks at them and says, well, they're worthy, they're not worthy, and the popular vote probably goes forward. I feel like that's how it works. Like we look at who has experience and who is ready and able to do it.
And I think, with those who are currently in position, there is an evaluation process that takes place. Those evaluations, and, if there are no term limits, if the person, has not reached a term limit, particularly for administration, then that evaluation should be factored into the nominating committee's decision or recommendation. There is
If they take place.
Yes. So, constituents and I'm not sure exactly of the group that gets the evaluation. I know office employees get them. And the nominating committee is tasked with looking through these evaluations to see, okay, do we feel this person is living up to their role and responsibility in that particular position?
I
don't
guess
know
one
how
of
much
the
weight
reasons
that
why I've been kind of pushy in this conversation is because I think that it is not the wisest of stewardship to not be able to discuss what the needs of the conference might be, and then to allow people to say, I believe that I might be led of God to fulfill that need.
Yeah.
And
Nick, I think the word
here's
what you're
the
trying to look
greater
at is
part.
platform.
If you can't tell me what the need is,
Right.
and I can't tell you how I'm going to address the need, then after I'm in a position, you can't hold me accountable to anything.
Exactly.
Have mercy.
So the word is we don't know what each other's platform is.
Right.
So in other words, if it's a friend of mine, I'm going to pull that person up first, or I'm going to pull this person up second. I look at, we were talking about this last week, when you look at those who are area leaders, you look at those who are directors, you look at those who are successful, whether in small or large churches. You look at the success of all these things. That's the reason why we have to also, that's why I think the website or what we do is profitable, because you should be able to look at how many baptisms came out of New Beginnings, or how many baptisms came out of so. So you're supposed to be able to see the evaluations of our churches and those who are in employees, not only employees, but who would fit that margin. So when I'm saying that nominating committee comes together, what they need to do is to do research before they come together on not the people, but what the position is supposed to do. And I think we lost sight of the position more than, and we're focusing on the people.
And I might add, because we don't have we don't have church analytics.
Right. That's right.
And that's not Adventist.
That's
I'm
right.
talking about church analytics.
That's right.
On a regular basis, which would include leadership success or failures.
That's right.
Based on conference-wide programs, then we as members and as nominating committees can look at the analytical data and say, okay, here's a name. Let's look at the analytics. According to the analytics, and this is not talking about personality and ability to get along with people. We're talking about the numbers. If we look at the analytics and say he or she has been very successful.
Did you say she?
Membership. Yes.
Yeah, she.
Oh, go ahead.
Membership.
We know what day
Membership.
that would be. A cold day, you know.
I'm going to reserve my thoughts, but there are people that work within our organization. There are women that work within our organization that I can see. See that they're capable even at the administrative level. But I'm going to let that pass. Don't forget, Latasha, to mute Nick as I'm going on from here, because he's going to say something. Mute Nick.
Let me just stress this point again.
Go ahead.
We need to make it a priority to have analytics visible to our members, to our pastors, to our administrators, so that it helps us to understand what good is.
Yeah.
Even if it's on an intranet. Even if it's not on an internet, but if it's on an intranet that we all can see each other's progress, then I can see where we're going with that. Because let's take it back, because this is the same thing that follows through the union. It follows the same thing with the division. It goes the same way with the GC. So we're not trying to exclude it just to be the conference level. We know that there are back doors of people chatting and carrying on in the back door before it comes to the table. That's not necessarily of God. Actually, it's not of God, because what we're doing is trying to move the hand of God. And we find ourselves doing that with communication with each other, or even water fountain conversations, etc., to see how we can get it there. But the real way for this to be able to happen is either two ways. Let's just be realistic. I know I'm going to get shot for this. One, you get a campaign manager.
Oh,
come on. Let's be realistic. You get a campaign manager and you put your platform out there. Right. The only way we're going to know what someone is thinking is if you put a platform out there. Right. And if you put the platform out there that this is the way I would like to govern, or this is the way I can see it, then the people will have a choice of being able to say, not only I think this is the right person, but they want to do this job. That takes away what you're talking about when you walk into the building and your name is up there and you say,
yeah.
Come on, let's be realistic to that.
I remembered at the last one of the sour points of the open mic session during our last constituency session was that an individual, a delegate, came up to the mic and said, and I'm paraphrasing, okay, so nominating committee comes back with this name of an individual. I don't even know who this person is. I know of them, but I don't know them. So the question was asked, on what criteria does the nominating committee bring this name for us to vote on? It was a very legitimate question. And it was also a revealing question. Now, it may speak to the weakness of our process. I don't know. But I can tell you more members than not come to constituency meetings, and I'll bring it all the way down to church board meetings and nominating committees, that have no clue as to the basis of a person being nominated for a particular position.
I know I'm raising my hand like I'm in class, but I got to say this.
Well, we know you're not in class. You have no class.
I got you. Here's what gets to me. We just talked about last week about changing policies, that we have the ability to change policy. Just hear me out, right?
Yeah.
I just used the church board as it being the same type of thing, not church board, but the nominating committee in church, the church at large, etc., as the same type of thing. We have the ability at the local church level to change the way we do nominating committee from the manual. There are churches who do it. Germantown has it changed that way. Ephesus Church has it changed that way. They have a ministry board, and they have a this board and a that board. Yeah. It doesn't have to go exactly the way. It is just a suggestive way to do it. So how come it's not changed or have the ability to change it on that on the other level?
Let me tell you this. When I first started, I think the year I started in the conference office was the session
18.
was coming up next. So you said,
Nick, you know what?
And listen, I was genuinely naive to the whole process. Okay. And so, I was listening and trying to figure out what's happening here. And I remember asking that same question. Well, how do we know? How do the people get to vote on the people? How do they know who they are? I said, I don't even know I didn't know who some of these people were until I started working here or came from me. So how would the people know? And I said, why can't people say they want to be something and we vote on these people? That was my question,
That's from
and
Satan.
it was delicately explained to me that
delicately.
Yes. That if we were to do it that way, then it would come off as more of a political thing. But the way that we follow is more of a spiritual process, that these decisions are God-led. But if we were to create that environment where people were vying against each other, then, it would breed some type of...
But they are vying against each other.
It's unspoken, but it's like it's one.
Well, then if it's unspoken, then
then it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, that was the.
If you're beating me in the head but not saying any words, I have no headache. Okay.
I mean, really and truly, if we were to be able, like you said, if we were able to make it known, what we will be doing is saying my platform is better than GP's platform, so choose me. You understand what I'm saying? So it'll become to that level. So I'm not saying as that we should change it as far as that level is concerned, but here's where I think the changes should come in. The nominating committee should meet longer. The nominating committee should do more research, more homework as far as it's concerned, than to rubber stamp somebody because Tally just said he'll do it. We like the way he speaks. When he's standing up there, he may look presidential or he may not look presidential. Let's go ahead and pick him when Tally is the worst person that should be up there.
Has
any of us been on a nominating committee? Has any
a vegetarian chicken in every pot? If you let me,
has any of us been on the nominating committee for the conference?
I have. Not at that level.
You have been.
Has. So
Okay.
Right. I didn't participate in the skullduggery intentionally. I said what I wanted to say very openly, and I think I got a career in radio directly afterwards. but the thing is that the nominating committee, and this goes back to how we govern ourselves. The nominating committee is a greater lean toward a representative form of government. Somebody else tells you who you might want. Right. When if you have a system where people can say, this is what I'd like to do, you can actually have the floor to just, in New York recently, they changed their system of voting where you vote for one person and then you vote for the others that you say, if this candidate doesn't win, this is who I like.
That's right.
Ranked voting.
Ranked voting, it's called. And so rather than have a nominating, why do you need a group of people to tell you who you want when the people who want to do it or who might be inclined to do it can say, I'd like to be considered, and the people on the floor can simply vote in a ranked voting method. That's just one system.
Yeah. And I have a question too, because it does appear that you have to be within the system to be nominated, right? You have to at least work maybe in the conference or be in some type of spiritual leadership that the person is well recognized, right, for what they do. So is there an expectation then of those who are already in leadership? Are they expecting a succession like, all right, I'm the next in line? Is automatically me. So when the nominating committee comes, if the person, because the person may be feeling, I've done a good job, it's only right for me to move forward, right? And so does the nominating committee have that in mind as well as some other names? It seems like that some other names were just thrown in as well as with the next person who they thought might just come in or someone returning to the same position. So that is my question. Is that expectation? Because last constituency was almost a Jerry Springer kind of show. If we were to be kind of we were to be real, it was a little rough there.
and here's the thing. And let's just be honest. Allegheny East don't do that. We're not like some of the other conferences that we wait to see who knocked out who or whatever the case may be. I mean, it's usually Allegheny East ends not on time, but we don't go till 2-3 o'clock in the morning. One of those
Not
type
anymore.
of things, right? So the truth is that Allegheny East, as we have seen it, and I could only speak for 20 years, moves on successions. And a lot of other conferences move on succession. This is not just Allegheny East. Most say if you're the secretary, then you're going to be the president next, or if you're a director, you're going to move up to be in this spot next. So the thing is, should we be thinking about succession? Because here's another thing: when you look at area leaders are also connected to the president or connected to the vision. You understand what I'm saying? So are we looking from that pot over there? Are you looking at, and I'll throw something out there because I happen to like the leadership of Buddy Bird. I like the leadership of Fordham, Pucky Fordham. I like the leadership. There's a lot of guys out there that we could say, wait a minute, that person could come from outside of the conference and come in the conference and be able to run it from, I was going to say business, but last show that we had, somebody done messed up, but could come from a standpoint of that person has the ability to lead, period. So that's why I say we need to do.
That's not what we do here, AC.
There's a rule that says you have to hire your own, right?
No, but you heard what she just said. We don't do this at AEC. So nobody, even in the talks or behind the doors, you're not going to hear about anybody else. So people who want to be president of AEC says, I need to have a church first. Or I need to have a church and then move into so-and-so first before Allegheny East does A, B, and C.
Well, I guess they want a priest to be the head, so you would want someone
the bylaws actually say you have to be an ordained minister to be certain offices.
That's right.
But now here's the thing. We have just acknowledged before all of our colleagues and listeners that we don't know what we do. We've just acknowledged that.
Is that the summary?
Well, we acknowledge that we understand the process. We don't understand the choice.
What the process is?
Russian roulette.
The process of nominating and organizing committee from the various churches, right? Choosing an organizing committee that then chooses a nominating committee, and then the nominating committee comes up with these names to present to the constituency meeting, and then we all come and vote for someone that either we know or we don't know, and that's how it's done.
Okay, so
in that process, I will point out that there is one irritant at the constituency meeting, and that is the way our system is set up. We bring all of the names and vote on all of the names at one time. Or
you have a decision of one by one. So it goes both. Most times you could do it by once and let it go. But here's another flaw. Let me just talk about another flaw. So if we don't want Latasha to be the communication director, I'm just saying, now we go back. Right? Hold on.
The same committee.
We go back now.
God's choking them. Look.
Yeah, you're coughing for a reason.
Somebody help him.
Drink some water.
No, here's what I'm saying.
Tasha just blew some powder over at him.
In the green room, did you say something about dragon or something like that? Listen, here's the case. Let's just say that, and any other director or any other position, you go back to a room that you should have prayed on, P-A-P-R-A-Y. You should have prayed on and knew what you were coming out with. So let's say you choose another person. You're really saying, just grab anybody. So there's no spiritual connotation to it at all to how you're going to do it. So if the nominating committee, if the people at large say we don't want Pat Graham or we don't want any of the directors or whatever, now you're going to go back in that split second and choose another person.
Come up with another name. Yeah.
And come up with another name. How do you come up with that name unless there's something political involved or something
or you refer it to the executive committee?
Yeah, which you still
But
have
then
to
that takes
choose.
away the power of the people.
It does.
Well, and the other side of it is that you still have to choose the executive committee who's going to choose that person.
Yeah,
That's
this
right.
process
See?
looks pretty clear to me. I'm glad I am submitting
Clear as mud.
to this august assembly of theological and ecclesiological experts that we come up with a system that allows us to receive people who perceive that they might be led to fulfill an obligation, and then we can discuss it at a more granular level. I mean, for example, at my church, I could say, here are some people who want to be considered to lead this great conference, rather than wait for. See, I really think our theology controls this, and our theology is the investigative judgment. Somebody goes in a room,
Come on.
and it's all secret. And don't nobody know what the choice is until it's too late to do anything about it.
I think, Nick, I hate you for this, Nick, but I think what you're talking about is the Catholic system. And then we have to wait for the white smoke to come out the top to decide if they made a decision or not.
It's kind of juvenile. I mean, because it's saying that I would rather believe that by the luck of the draw, something good might happen, rather than put in the work and be accountable and responsible for making an informed decision.
But aren't they really though? I mean, I as clergy, people are always thinking, hey, we want to hear the voice of God, right? We want to hear the voice of God. We don't want it to just be political, even though there are times when people really start out holy, right? In their leadership. They start out really holy, but after a while, then it becomes a desire for power. All right. Mm-hmm. That's what becomes a desire for power. And so the church's process, they're trying to be as holy as possible. So the committee comes together and we pray, which was the outcome last time. They said we had a decision. We felt like we prayed about it. So in the meeting, when it was said, no, there's some wrong that has been done here. There's conniving, there's deception that has been done. Let the committee go back and meet again. And the committee goes back and meets, and they come back out and they say, we feel that this is whom God has said. Mm-hmm. So I said all of that to say, as and I agree to a certain extent that, you should know all of the people who are really able to lead in that position. But the church wants to feel that it is God who is leading this and not just us and our own people's choice. Mm-hmm. Because we do make mistakes.
Put all the names in the bag. Yeah, we do. We should put all the names in the bag, shake it up,
but
and pray first. And no, go ahead.
But I do think too, with church leadership, and this is something that's different for me. We don't even really consider the position in terms of what it requires and matching it up with certain gifts. It's almost like we choose our leaders and then we'll just direct you into a certain position. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think it's one size fits all when it comes to church leadership. And sometimes I feel like we do that. Like, let's just choose our leaders and then we'll decide where they go after. I don't know. I mean, because this issue of competence comes up a lot.
Sure.
When it comes to things getting done or whatever after the fact. But it was like, we chose someone whose leadership we admired. Okay, I can get that. But did we consider whether they would be able to perform this specific function as it related to, the church? I think that's another area where I think, we need to spend a little bit more time.
Well, let's land this plane. I mean, we've talked for a while. What we have acknowledged is that while we have mechanisms that we really are not clear as to how we feed the mechanisms that produce our leadership, which is something that we need to think more about. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are sincere men and women who are always chosen. I have no doubt about the sincerity of the people who are chosen, but I have all sorts of doubt about the systems that produce the names that we have. And I'm hoping that we can evolve it forward as we consider a $40 million operation with $250
I think we're
million
going to get robbed.
in
We're going to
assets.
get robbed.
Yeah,
How
right.
much money
We
we
got
got.
a quarter.
Where?
We got the guns though. We ready. You ready?
Yeah.
So I think that's it. Final words, anyone, before we close down?
I think if those who are listening to this now, pray for the system that Nick just talked about.
Yeah.
Because we still know that God put up kings and God takes down kings. And sometimes God allows us to go through certain things in order for that when the change comes, it's done more in God's favor than in our favor.
Yeah.
I liked it what Nick was talking about as far as platforms. What ends up happening with mankind is that we start off with the greatest of intentions. And then you bump into the lobbyists, and then you bump into those who want you to do something for them. And then it moves from one thing to the other that you forget about what your intention was. So I take it back to the very beginning to say, pray for your leaders and pray for the one who has not gotten there yet. That when they sit in that Marlena priestly seat, that they will do the bidding of God and not the bidding of man. And I think that's where we need to focus on more than anything else.
And I'd like to piggyback real quick what Pat was saying, and also what Nick was saying when he made the statement that maybe the nominating committee should meet for a period of time and maybe really go into some fasting and praying, that God would reveal, because to be very honest, we as people, we're wicked. We choose, from various things, but God has a real purpose as to why he puts people in place. And there's sometimes we may not understand why. There may be times we feel like the person is not competent. They didn't think Moses had any skills. It's like, you don't have no skills, right? I mean, his cousin even was going against him, like, God not just speaking to you, he's speaking to me too, right? And so there are things that we don't understand why God does what he does. So I like the concept or nominating them early, letting them go into a time of fasting and praying, coming up with various people, and then let God speak to that.
Yeah, who
I
knows?
agree.
Maybe in 2022 we might see some nominees or people who feel led by the Spirit to lead, share their vision or aspirations or ideas for leadership on this Upset podcast. Who knows?
Who's listening to us?
And just my final word is dovetailing on what Marlena said, and I just kind of couch it into two things, and that is the practice of prayer in this process, and spiritual discernment.
Crucial. So crucial.
Amen.
Well, and there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. I turn it over now to our esteemed anchor woman. Back to you, Tasha.
Thank you, my upsetters, my friends, my colleagues. Once again, guys, great discussion. I mean, I think as much as we talk about things, it makes us think about more things, even as we're discussing it in this platform. And we're hoping that our listeners and our viewers are doing the same thing. We're not just having these discussions just to talk and pass the time. We really want everyone to kind of think about how we do things. And if there are adjustments that need to be made, how do we present those in a way that makes sense? But thank you guys once again for tackling another subject that's not always so popular to talk about openly. And so you guys know the deal. We want to know what you think. And
wait,
so
do we really?
Yeah.
Oh, you know what?
Care about what
I think we're going to find out whether we want to or
not. Yeah.
Chuck, that's you, Chuck.
Yeah. So if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube and you feel comfortable putting your comment there, you can do it. But if you want to just email us, on the back end, do so at upset@acsda.com. Just give us your feedback. What are you thinking about everything that you've heard here today? What are some changes or some areas of concern that you may have as it relates to church governance? We would like to know. And of course, please continue to follow us on all of our podcast platforms. The Upset, look for us and download and follow us from week to week every Sunday at 6 p.m. All right, guys.
All right.
Well, are we done here today?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
We're
we're done.
I
done.
think it's
I
time to
think
go
we're
into some
done.
prayer and
Even though we
fasting.
I
we
hope
might
we've
be on.
upset
done.
someone.
Yeah, I think we need to fast first.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are we going to have a part 2? Because we didn't really touch on the union and the GC levels. So
I think we should.
Oh,
Yeah, I think we
wow.
want to keep this dialogue going about church governance. We kind of got stuck at AAC there. But yeah, let's
Only
take it.
God knows what we would do if we didn't have a union.
Oh my God.
No. Okay.
we'd have more money.
Oh no. Here we go.
We love you.
Here's the trailer for the next part.
Our people.
All right.
Bye, guys.
We'll see you
Peace
guys
out,
next
y'all.
time.
Bye.